My sister betrayed me with my fiancé for 6 months. My parents defended her and gave me an ultimatum. But I got married without them, and now they have to live with the consequences they never expected. I'm 29 years old. I work at a university library, cataloging books and old archives, and I need to get this story off my chest, because what happened 2 years ago basically destroyed my relationship with my parents and my sister. And even though I'm happy now, there are days when I still can't believe all of this actually happened. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, not the very beginning, but when things started falling apart. Though looking back, I should have seen the signs much earlier. I was always the quiet daughter, you know? The one who preferred staying home reading instead of going out to parties. The one who got good grades but never drew attention. The one who basically went unnoticed while my sister Sarah, 2 years younger than me, was the family star. Sarah was artistic, outgoing, always had some creative project or dramatic story to tell, and my parents, John and Mary, like 55 and 53 years old now, basically adored her. Not that they didn't love me, but let's say Sarah was always more interesting, more fun, more everything. I was fine with that. Honestly, I didn't mind being the quiet one. I had my life, my books, my job that I loved. I met Ryan when I was 25. He was 28 at the time. And it was like a miracle for me because I had never been good with relationships, had never had serious boyfriends. And suddenly this guy appeared who was handsome, worked in finance, had his life organized, and for some reason was interested in me. We dated for almost 3 years. And I thought I had finally found someone who saw me. You know what I mean? Someone who appreciated that I was quiet and thoughtful instead of seeing it as something boring. We got engaged after 2.5 years together, at a simple dinner at our favorite restaurant. Nothing extravagant because neither of us was that type of person. And I was happy. I'm like genuinely happy thinking I was going to spend the rest of my life with him. The thing is that Ryan and Sarah got along, well, maybe too well. But I never suspected anything because why would I? She was my sister. My little sister who supposedly loved me. And he was my fiancé. He came to family dinners. Sometimes the three of us would go out together when Sarah needed company to go to some art exhibition or event, and everything seemed normal. Completely normal. Sarah was 24 when all this started. She was working as a freelance graphic designer, lived in a small apartment that my parents helped her pay for because, Sarah always needed help with something. I discovered everything by accident, which is almost comical in retrospect because if it had been in a movie, it would have been this big, dramatic detective moment. But no, it was literally because Ryan sent an email to the wrong recipient. We were planning the wedding, like 8 months away from the date, and I was on his laptop looking for some documents about our venue reservations when I saw a new email come in. And the preview said something about missing last night and had Sarah's name. My brain didn't process immediately. Like I just stared at the screen thinking maybe it was about some outing they had with a group of friends or something. But something in my stomach felt weird, you know? That feeling that something isn't right but your mind still doesn't want to accept it. I opened the email, and then another, and basically spent like 2 hours reading a 6-month conversation between my fiancé and my sister where they talked about what they did when I was working, how hard it was to keep the secret, how Sarah felt guilty but couldn't stop, how Ryan said he loved me, but with Sarah he felt something different, something more exciting. There were photos I'm not going to describe because they still make me physically sick. There were plans for meetups at her apartment when I thought Ryan was working late. There were messages of them making fun of how oblivious I was, how easy it was to deceive me because I never suspected anything. I read everything, sitting on the living room floor, and I don't think I cried in that moment. I was like in shock, as if I was reading someone else's story and not my own life falling apart on a screen. Ryan got home around 7 at night. I was still sitting there on the floor with the laptop, and the first thing I did was ask him, I need you to be honest with me right now. Is there anything I should know about you and Sarah? And he turned white, literally lost all the color from his face. And in that moment, I knew it was real, that it wasn't a nightmare or a misunderstanding. He tried to deny it at first, then tried to minimize it, saying it had only been a couple of times, that it didn't mean anything, and I just put the laptop in front of him with all the emails open. He stayed quiet for like 5 minutes, and then started with the excuses. That Sarah had seduced him, that he had tried to resist, that everything had been a huge mistake, and that he loved me, only me. I told him to leave. Just like that. Grab his things and leave our apartment. That was technically more mine because I had put down the initial deposit. He tried to stay, tried to kneel and cry and beg, and part of me wanted to believe him because it was easier than accepting that the last 3 years had been a lie. But the stronger part of me, the part I never knew I had, told him he had 1 hour to get the essentials and I would send the rest later. He left, and I was alone in an apartment that was supposed to be our home before we got married and moved to something bigger. I called my best friend Emily that night, around 11, and when she answered half asleep and heard my voice, she just said, "I'm coming over," and arrived in 20 minutes with ice cream and a bottle of wine, even though neither of us are big drinkers. I told her everything, every horrible detail, and she hugged me while I finally started to cry. Not like pretty movie crying, but ugly, crying with snot and weird sounds and feeling like someone had opened my chest and taken out everything inside. Emily stayed with me that night, and the next 3 nights, sleeping on my couch, making sure I ate something, reminding me I had to go to work, even though all I wanted was to stay in bed forever. But Sarah was another matter. I hadn't said anything to her yet because I needed to process the Ryan thing first, and I think part of me hoped that maybe Ryan would tell her or that somehow she would know that I knew. But almost a week passed, and she sent me a super casual message asking if I wanted to go to lunch on Sunday. I said yes, that we should meet at a coffee shop near her apartment. And when I arrived, she was there, smiling with her artistic clothes and her hair up in that messy bun she always wore, and she gave me a hug like nothing, as if she hadn't been sleeping with my fiancé for half a year. We sat down and ordered coffee, and I waited until the waiter left to tell her, "I know about Ryan." Her face changed instantly, like all the blood drained from her face and her eyes got big, and she started stuttering something about not knowing what I was talking about, and I took out my phone and showed her screenshots of some of the emails. She stared at the screen and then started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse, but rather tears of panic. You know? Of someone who just got caught. I asked her how she could do that to me. How she could look me in the face at family dinners and hug me and act like she was my sister, while all the time she was destroying my life. And she said, "It wasn't my intention. It just happened. And we fell in love." That word, "fell in love," hit me like a slap because it meant it wasn't just sex or a stupid affair, but that she genuinely had feelings for my fiancé. I told her I never wanted to see her again, that to me she ceased to exist as a sister, and I got up and left while she kept crying at the table. I had to tell my parents because I knew they would eventually find out and I preferred it to be from me. So I went to their house on a Wednesday night when I knew they would both be there. My mother, Mary, opened the door and saw my face and said, "What happened?" Because I guess it showed that something was wrong. And when we went into the living room and my father John came out of his study, I told them everything, every horrible detail, and I expected them to be furious with Sarah, to support me, to understand why I had ended my engagement and why I didn't want to talk to my sister again. But what happened was completely different. My mother started crying and saying things like, "Family is the most important thing, and these things happen, and you need to forgive your sister." And my father, who had always been quieter and more practical, said he understood I was hurt, but that Sarah was young and had made a mistake, and that we couldn't let this destroy the family. I said, "Did you hear what I just told you? She had a 6-month affair with my fiancé. She lied to me. She betrayed me in the worst possible way, and you want me to forgive and forget like nothing happened." My mother said that time would heal the wounds, and that someday I would look back and see that it wasn't worth losing my sister over a man. I left that house feeling like I had just lost not only my fiancé and my sister, but also my parents, because clearly they weren't on my side. They were on the side of keeping family peace at the expense of my feelings. Emily picked me up because I was too upset to drive, and she offered to let me stay at her apartment as long as I needed, because living alone at that moment was too much, and I accepted because honestly I didn't know what else to do. I lived with Emily for like 3 months, sleeping in her guest room that she used as an office, paying her rent even though she said it wasn't necessary, trying to rebuild my life piece by piece. My parents called me every week asking me to come to dinner, to talk to Sarah, to take the first step toward reconciliation, and I always said no, that I wasn't ready, that maybe I would never be ready, and the calls became less frequent and more tense. It was during that time that I met Alex in, of all possible ways, the library. He came to look for some historical archives for a research project. He was like 31 years old, was a history professor at a nearby university, and was exactly the type of person I never thought would attract me, because he was completely different from Ryan, more relaxed, more genuine, with a sarcastic sense of humor that made me laugh even when I didn't want to. We started talking every time he came to the library, then getting coffee after my shift, and eventually he asked me out on a real date, and I said yes, even though part of me was scared to trust someone again. I told him about Ryan and Sarah on our third date because I felt like he needed to know the truth, about why I was so emotionally closed off, and I expected him to get scared and disappear. But instead he said, "Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me that. It must have been horrible. And if you need time or space, just tell me." He didn't try to minimize what had happened or tell me I should forgive or get over it. He was just there, patient and understanding, letting me go at my own pace. We dated for almost a year before he proposed to me, and when he did, it was perfect. Not big or extravagant, but on a walk through a park we liked, sitting on a bench watching the sunset, and he asked me if I wanted to build a life with him, just like that. I said yes because I genuinely wanted to, because with him I felt safe and valued and seen in a way I had never felt before. We started planning the wedding, something small and intimate, with like 50 people, at a nice but not ostentatious venue, and I was happy. Like really happy for the first time in a long time. Emily was going to be my maid of honor, obviously, because she had been there in my worst moments, and Alex's family was incredible, warm and welcoming, the kind of family I had always wanted. I told my parents about the engagement over the phone because our relationship was still tense, but I thought they should know. And my mother got happy at first, asking about the details and the date, but then she said, "I guess this means Sarah will be invited too." And I stayed quiet for a moment before saying, "No, Sarah is not going to be invited." My mother's tone changed immediately, saying that was unacceptable, that she was my sister, that family should be together at important moments. And I said, "She made her choice when she decided to betray me. I'm making mine." My father got into the conversation, grabbed the other house phone, and said that if Sarah wasn't invited, then they wouldn't go either, that they weren't going to be part of something that excluded their daughter. I said, "So you're choosing Sarah over me? After everything she did, you're on her side." And my mother said it wasn't about choosing sides but about keeping the family together. I explained that Sarah had broken the family, not me, that I was the victim in this whole situation, and that I had the right to want to be surrounded only by people who supported me at my wedding. But they didn't want to listen. Things got worse when my mother called me a week later and suggested, casually as if it were something reasonable, that maybe I should consider not having Emily as maid of honor because her presence was like a reminder that I had chosen a friend over my family. I was literally speechless. "Did you really just say that?" And she said she was just trying to find a solution that worked for everyone, that if I made some compromises, maybe Sarah could come and everything would be more harmonious. I told her that Emily had been there when my family abandoned me, when I needed support and no one else gave it to me, and that I would rather cancel the whole wedding than ask her to step aside. My father got on the phone and said I was being childish and selfish, that I was letting pride destroy the family, and I, who had never in my life yelled at my parents, yelled at him that they had destroyed whatever relationship we could have had when they decided that Sarah's feelings were more important than mine, that their comfort was more important than my pain, and that if they couldn't respect my decision, then they simply shouldn't come to my wedding. I hung up the phone, shaking with rage and sadness, and Alex hugged me while I cried, not for Sarah or Ryan, but for my parents, for the relationship we would never have again. They tried to call me several times in the following weeks, leaving voicemails that alternated between pleas and threats, saying I would regret this decision, that someday I would understand how important family is, that I was making a mistake there would be no coming back from. I didn't respond to them, and eventually the messages stopped. And like a month before the wedding, I received a formal email from my father saying they would not attend the event and that they respected my decision, but hoped that someday I would reconsider my position with Sarah. The wedding was beautiful. Seriously, despite everything, or maybe because of everything. 50 people who genuinely loved me and supported my happiness. Alex's family who had accepted me from the beginning, Emily who gave a speech that made me cry with happiness instead of sadness, and Alex, who looked at me during the whole ceremony as if I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. There was a moment during the reception when I looked toward where my parents should have been and felt a pang of sadness. But then Alex squeezed my hand and asked if I was okay. And I realized that yes, I was okay. That I was better than okay. We went on our honeymoon to a beach resort for 2 weeks, one of those places with white sand and turquoise water that looked like postcards. And it was exactly what I needed. Like completely disconnecting from all the drama and just existing with my new husband in this little paradise. Alex is amazing with details. He had made sure we had activities planned, but also time to just do nothing. And we spent whole days reading on the beach, swimming, eating delicious food, and talking about our future together. We came back from the honeymoon like 6 months ago. We moved to a new apartment that we chose together, a bigger one with space for an office where Alex can work, and a small library where I keep all my books. Life is quiet now, you know? I go to work, I come home and Alex is there, we cook together, we watch movies on the couch with our cat that we adopted 2 months ago, and it's a simple life but genuinely happy. My parents haven't tried to contact me since the wedding, and honestly, I don't know if that makes me feel relieved or sad. Probably both. Sarah is apparently still with Ryan, according to a distant cousin who couldn't keep quiet, and supposedly they're living together now, which is ironic because that's what we were going to do. I don't feel anything when I think about them together. Not anger or jealousy, just like a feeling of emptiness, as if they were people I knew in another life. Emily comes to dinner every week. Sometimes she brings her new boyfriend who's pretty cool, and we laugh about stupid things and talk about our jobs and plans for the future. And it's nice to have that constant in my life, someone who was there at the worst and now can be here at the best. Alex's family treats me like I'm their daughter. Literally, his mom calls me more often than my own parents ever did, asking me how I am, inviting me to family lunches, reminding me to bring a sweater because, according to her, I'm always cold. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. If I should have tried to forgive Sarah or at least maintain a superficial relationship with my parents for the sake of having family. But then I remember how I felt reading those emails, how I felt when my parents basically told me my pain didn't matter as much as keeping up appearances, and I know I did the only thing I could do to maintain my dignity and my mental health. I don't owe forgiveness to people who never acknowledged the damage they did to me. I don't owe a relationship to people who chose the easy path over doing the right thing. Last week, Alex asked me if I ever thought about reconciling with my family, and I was honest with him. I told him that maybe someday, if they take the first real step, not just asking me to forget, but genuinely acknowledging what happened and truly apologizing, maybe I could consider talking to them. But until then, I'm fine with the family I've built, with Emily and Alex's family and the few people in my life who proved to be there when it really mattered. And that has to be enough, I guess, because it's all I have and all I need right now.